Welcome to the Nerd Party.
Hi, this is Nick Anastasiou, lead editor and writer on Mall Shadowlord, and you're listening to Aggressive Negotiations.
Hello and welcome to Aggressive Negotiations, coming at you from Now Hutta. We've done a little bit of rearranging of things, but man, the new place is nice. I'm loving these digs. And with me, as he is every single episode, none other than Jedi Master John Mills. John, how are you liking the mud bath? Man, it's nice and warm. It's feeling good.
Well, I would say that this particular spot is a lot more airy, a lot more open space now. And I like that. I like that. It's got a very open floor plan. And, that's a positive. That's a real positive, I think. And, good swimming. Good swimming. Great for the skin. Great for the skin. Keeps you looking young and vibrant. And wondering what was the story of that rocking chair that Gattori was on. Very curious about that. I don't know.
Yeah, agreed. I kind of wondered that as well. I mean, it looked pretty comfortable, though.
It did.
So,
it did.
Really glad the explosions didn't ruin that rocking chair. Maybe we should just go hang out. We'll do that after we do the show. But we're so glad you're here. You've chosen that little slice of Star Wars heaven that you just can't get anywhere else. And we do this for love of the saga. That's our new hashtag, love of the saga. But if you would like to follow us or interact with us anywhere on social media, we would love that. You can go over to X Twitter. We're at the Jedi Masters. We're on Instagram with the entire network at the Nerd Party. You can find us online at thenerdparty.com. And of course, we're on Facebook at facebook.com/the Nerd Party. So all of those places you can interact with us. Plus, subscribe if you're listening to this. Get the show as soon as it drops. And that way, you can tell all your friends about it too. And give us star ratings and reviews and things like that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all of those places. But John, I love it when we do a topic that neither of us know, like one of us doesn't know what's coming, right? And
Yes.
This is one of those episodes. I texted you this week and I said, dude, I got a topic. And you were like, that's great. And I said, tonight, do you want me to tell you what it is or do you want to just roll? And you're like, no, man, roll. And so that's exactly what we're going to do tonight. You
Bring
don't
it
know what
on.
this topic is.
Yes.
But So the lovely Ashley Eckstein was at a recent expo with a reunion panel for the Clone Wars. And she was reflecting on what it was like to launch the animated series when Star Wars had very little momentum, right? The original trilogy was over, the prequel trilogy was over, and as far as we knew, there was no Star Wars that was going to be coming out. And then the Clone Wars came out. And this is, of course, before Disney bought it. And that in some ways that she was saying that without the success that we had with the Clone Wars, we might not be seeing things that we're getting even in Disney, like with The Mandalorian, Boba Fett, all this other stuff. And so I wanted to just talk about that with you. And one, do you agree with her? Do you think that the Clone Wars helped kind of set the template for so much of what we are seeing that's coming out of Disney these days?
Yeah, I think I take that perspective. I take that perspective for granted. That basically, I know that 2005 came around, and I always, I've always told the story when Revenge of the Sith came out. I basically said to my wife, I said, "Okay, this is it. Childhood's really over now. This is done, right? There's no more Star Wars to be had. We're walking away at this point." And I said goodbye, and I walked off. And I said, "This will always be a treasured piece of my life, and it's done with." And then when they announced Clone Wars was going to be a movie, and this is a funny bit of history repeating, people got mad. Anakin has an apprentice. It's animated. What on earth? Why are you setting it between the 2 of the prequels. The prequels suck. What are you talking about? Why would you do this? Why aren't you doing this during the original trilogy? Everybody likes the original trilogy. People can go back and do revisionist history all that they want to. I was there for these conversations.
Yeah, same.
And it came out, and I remember a friend of mine, Joey, who I've talked about before, when Star Wars The Clone Wars opened at the movie theaters at number 3, he lamented. He said, no Star Wars movie has ever opened at number 3 before. This is so sad. This isn't really success. And I said, I don't know, man. It's pretty good. I really liked it a lot.
Yeah.
I'm surprised I liked it as much as I did. And he just wouldn't let it go. Star Wars was dead. And then the show came out, and I remember momentum wasn't immediately there. So I think that it then built on it. It was completely unexpected. And suddenly, out of nowhere, Clone Wars became a thing. Yeah. And people were on board with it, and it became the thing that everybody loved. And I completely agree with her. I think she's absolutely right. Everything that has come since then is built on the shoulders of the Clone Wars. That proved that a different type of storytelling was possible, that Star Wars on television was possible, that different media were possible, that basically planning out all of your stuff ahead of time, a different way of doing television production, I think. And obviously, I can't speak to the stuff on the inside the way that, a certain friend of the show can. And I would never dare to try to take that place in a conversation. Yeah. But I think anybody who worked on the Clone Wars would agree. They were making it up as they went. They were figuring it out as they went, and they were doing it just for the love of the game. Like, I know I'm rambling, but it seems like Clone Wars was once again a success for the same reason that anything else was a success that Lucas made with Star Wars, which was he always seemed to go to his crew and his cast and say, I'm the only person you have to please. I'm doing this for me. And if other people love it, I'm on board too. And that, so I think everything traces back to that moment. It proved that Star Wars could exist outside of a trilogy of Skywalker movies. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with so much of what you're saying there, and I think there are just so many branches that of all that you were saying that we could just like pick up one and probably talk for an hour on. And, I think one of the things that you mentioned that I just kind of want to pick up and run with is, the idea that they were in some ways, making this up as they went along, and all they had to do was to please George. And what that meant was for them really getting to kind of expand what Star Wars is in the first place, right? In the sense of the type of stories that we're going to tell, because that's one of the things about the Clone Wars we've talked about so many times, is it opened the door for them to try to tell Star Wars stories, but through different genres, with different moods, with different sensibilities, right? You talk about Lucas wanting to make, his esoteric films that he would only see in his basement. I would say to you, the Droid arc is that series, right? Is Lucas thinking about the super esoteric, weird stuff, that harkens back all the way to the kind of the crazy, out of his mind, experimental type of film that you would get with like THX 1138, right? But then you got to ultra mythology, with the Mortis trilogy or the Yoda arc that we got, or you just got plain, silly episodes with like the Jar Jar episode where he's being the Jedi, the pretend Jedi, and so. And I think that's the thing. When I look at then what Disney ran with, especially with what they enabled somebody like Favreau, who comes in with this idea where he wants to truly take a lot of the thought processes and different genres that inspired Lucas and really go for the, man with no name, wolf and cub storyline, and really ground Star Wars in that kind of like Western feel, you know. Clone Wars had set up the success to show how you can do that type of stuff. And, you know, I think too, the other huge point of this is that so much of what we get in Star Wars these days is just rooted in the storytelling that got expanded in the Clone Wars in the first place. The mythology that they created, the way in which George was able to just expand the universe by giving us things like Zero the Hutt, or which, you know, or, you know, you think of all of the different races that we got to kind of dig more into, you know, whether it was the Mon Cal or any of these type of things, right? We're seeing all of this stuff kind of play itself out in shows like The Mandalorian, The Book of Boba Fett, Ahsoka, Andor, you know, like, you know, people, there's this, you know, ridiculous thing that's happening online right now with like Andor versus the Mandalorian and Grogu, right? But both of those things actually have their basis in the type of storytelling that we got in the Clone Wars, right?
Yes.
Because we had those ultra political intrigue episodes in the Clone Wars, which Andor built on. Or we had the crazy, outlandish monster episodes like the Zillo Beast that the Mandalorian Grogu kind of builds on, right? And so I think Ashley is 100% right in the sense that not only did in some ways, I think Star Wars was saved by the Clone Wars coming around, but it actually paved the way for all the things that we are loving now.
I agree. And I think that you're hitting on a very important point, that Clone Wars was the first to really experiment so openly with different styles and bringing them in and just saying, you know, let's just see what let's see what works here. What can play in the Star Wars universe? What is Star Wars? Well, it's a story about soldiers behind the lines, or it's a story about, you know, criminal gangsters and Cad Bane or anything like that, or any of a number of things. And Star Wars is something that, thanks to the Clone Wars, is expanded to the point where all of these different types of things can coexist. And I hate it when I or anybody else dares to draw parallels with the other Star franchise. But what has Star Trek always struggled to do? To stop being a Starfleet show. It loses its identity an awful lot. What is Star Trek if it's not Kirk on the bridge or Cisco on DS9? Like DS9 was like a big breakthrough thing for Star Trek and that sort of stuff. But it's always struggled with the fan base accepting that. And I think what you're seeing is that there's certain pieces of the fan base in Star Wars that have calcified. And Star Wars can only be this, and Star Wars can only be that. And maybe it's a function of age. I don't know. Or people getting grumpy as they get older, or people not being open to different things. But being somebody just barely old enough to have comprehended Mark Hamill on the Muppets, or very, very vague memories of the Star Wars holiday special, or any of those other weird things. None of us said, oh, well, that's not Star Wars. We just said, oh, well, you know, in the case of something like the holiday special, or even Ewoks or Droids cartoons, it's like, I'm not nuts about this. Did we stop being fans? Did we say, oh, Star Wars is over? No, Star Wars always reinvents itself. And it says, okay, you know what? We'll try this. Are we the Ewok movies? Are we the Droid series? Are we Andor? Are we the prequels? Are we the movie without a movie with Shadows of the Empire? We're all of these things. And just let Star Wars keep being a playground, man.
Mm-hmm.
Don't sit on the grass and talk of the death of Star Wars. It's very much alive. Let it just keep doing its thing and trying different stuff.
Well, and I think that there's something important about that in that sense, right? Is that, and I think this is the thing that the Clone Wars does really open the door to, which is to expand the storytelling by pulling from different genres to tell different types of stories, and it's all contained within the saga, right? But it also helped us realize that not every story needed to be universe expanding. We're going to have to destroy a Death Star type of thing. Like, I think the Clone Wars helped us realize that some of the best stories weren't really about, trying to do something massive to save the galaxy, even though it's all contained within that. But like those small stories, you think of like Lightsaber Lost, right? Great episode,
Yeah.
I even think of the final 4 episodes of Clone Wars, which, yes, they have massive implications for the saga as a whole. But really, it's an incredibly personal story of Ahsoka, right? It's her journey of surviving, right? And it's one of the best things that Star Wars has ever done. And yet, it's not about saving the galaxy. It's about saving herself in this moment of absolute crisis. And it truly just is about this character growing and all of those things. And when we look then at the storytelling that's coming out, it's like, so when you get a movie like The Mandalorian and Grogu, not every Star Wars film has to be about galaxy-ending threats.
Right.
It's about telling stories about characters that you love and watching them grow. That's all good storytelling is anyway, right? And so the thought process that everything has to be basically focused just like one of the episodes is, I think, a detriment to the lessons that we learned from the Clone Wars and good Star Wars storytelling. And I think that's something that, like, in many ways, people are going to have to get used to if you want a franchise to be able to continue, right? It has to be able to find ways to organically grow and tell stories that keep people interested, but aren't just doing the same thing over and over and over again. And I think about it in some ways too. I think that's one of the reasons that people really enjoyed Rogue One, right? It was an important story, but it had a lot to do with characters that, like, almost all of them die.
Right.
And so, but just watching their story for 2.5 hours was enough. Yes, they did something important too, right? And so, yeah, I don't know, man. It's one of those things when I really look at the beauty of what the Clone Wars gave us as Star Wars fans. I don't think that it's outrageous to say that it really truly does set the template for how to continue to tell Star Wars stories, maybe for another 50 years.
Well, I think that also you're seeing with the reaction to, for instance, the box office of The Mandalorian and Grogu. Again, history repeating. When the Clone Wars came out, Star Wars is over. Look, it's number 3 at the box office. Nobody cares anymore. Yeah, you know what? And it was something that everybody said it was dead on the vine, and what a misfire. What a miscalculation. But what it was a recalibration. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Now we know what the audience is willing to accept. And we've got enough of them on board that they'll give us a chance. Yeah, it's sort of going in reverse order with Mandalorian and Grogu, but people are already prognosticating about, Starfighter has to do big money. No, it doesn't. It needs to do enough money because we are in a different era. And I lay all of this at the feet of Disney with the damn Marvel movies. Sorry to go on my typical sort of tangent. I'll just keep it very brief this time. Everybody should be familiar with it. But conditioning everybody to think that a movie is unsuccessful if it doesn't make $1 billion. Let's break it down one more time for everybody. No matter how much a movie makes, the people in Hollywood who parenthetically as an aside, love to tell us all what we should be doing to save the world and all of that type of stuff. Through clever accounting, every movie loses money technically. And it's just a question of different tax level stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, there are a barometer of interest. But if what it does is it says to Disney, okay, make smaller movies and reset your expectations, great. That means I'm going to get more smaller movies.
Yeah.
And guess what? They'll be willing to experiment more and say, you know what? Maybe we were wrong. Hey, Steven Soderbergh, come on over and make The Hunt for Ben Solo. We don't need to make $1 billion off of that. We'll make $400 million. That's fine. And we'll bring you over here and we'll see an interesting story. And we'll tell stories out of order.
Yeah.
Where they don't have to go in sequence or anything like that. Sorry, I know that's a typical sort of tangent, but it's one of those things where Disney's own marketing screwed everybody, and Avatar's included in that, because Avatar goes and it makes a ridiculous amount of money at the worldwide box office, and suddenly everybody's thinking, oh, you got to make $3 billion to be successful.
Yep.
You stop setting this sort of expectation. Just make movies again. Just make movies that draw enough people to the theater. A nice, consistent stream of people to the theater is better than the tentpole model anyway. Let's recalibrate and go for that, and make up the margins on merch. Sell your ridiculous popcorn buckets. That's fine. If that's going to make up the difference, do that. All for it.
Well, and again, like, I think that this is one of the things that's really interesting about this as well. You know, when Ashley talks about the idea of the way in which the Clone Wars kind of worked to save Star Wars, a big part of that too is that there is a generation that's out there that's old enough to be seeing this stuff in the theater, that Star Wars was brought to them through the avenue of the Clone Wars. And so telling stories that are akin to what we saw in the Clone Wars, I think, is just incredibly smart on that front. Like, we forget sometimes, that we are in an era where, the kids who grew up on the prequels and the kids who grew up on the Clone Wars are the ones that, the studio does need to reach, right? And so by referencing the things and telling stories with the things that they loved, that's a smart idea, right? Because, in the end, just trying to hold on to the people who, saw it in 1977, that's a generation that's not going to help the franchise continue the same way that the ones who grew up with the prequels and the ones who grew up the Clone Wars are the ones to tap into.
But it will that older generation as well, very vocally, they're the Debbie Downers at a party where everybody just wants to have a good time, just like hang out, and then they'll come in and it's all about how they're feeling about something. And it's like, I'm not Mr. Positivity. I'm not Ned Flanders about everything. But at the same time, it's like, oh, okay, I get it. Like I have a dear friend where like all he does is complain about stuff. It was like he goes to the movies and all he does is complain about the movies. And it's like, what? Why do you keep going? And the response I've gotten is, well, there's nothing else to do. I'm like, there's so much else to do. If it's not working for you, walk away, brother.
You can always just read a good book.
Go walk out. Everybody says touch grass, but no, you know what? Paint, read 100%. A book, listen to an old album on vinyl because it's so much better. Anyway, this wasn't so much about that as like, I just think that she's absolutely correct. Everything that exists today is because the Clone Wars series broke that ground, broke through, and made it possible. And it's all built on that. The Mandalorian is a direct offshoot of Favreau coming in and the Mandalorian lore. Oh no, the precious EU was completely blown up and rewritten in the prequel trilogy and in the Clone Wars series, completely blown up and rewritten, and everything about it changed, and everybody said, "Oh, cool."
Yeah.
Some people still complained, but most everybody said, "Oh, cool." And so, yeah, like you can go all the way to The Mandalorian, and that is straight because of the Clone Wars. It is a direct line. And there you go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you think about it, and, John and Dave talked about this, and especially John, that Dave is the one kind of responsible for bringing him into Star Wars in the first place, because Dave visited the set of Iron Man, right? And then asked him if he wanted to do a voice in the Clone Wars. And John was like, yeah, and so that's how John came into this and we got connected. And like you said, it's all because he also played a Mandalorian, that what we have as that show in the first place exists. And so I love, man, I think, I love being able to see the beauty of something where, like, because this is the other thing, like my wife and I actually watched the Clone Wars movie before she went and saw The Mandalorian and Grogu. And one of the interesting aspects of that is that, she loves Star Wars, right? She's seen it all. But she's not like I am in the sense that, like, knowing everything behind the scenes, right? So she didn't know that Rhoda was going to be in the film.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they said that, we had just watched that movie. She looks over at me in the theater and like gives me that big face, like, really? Like, yeah. And she was excited, right? And so, I mean, it's just, in the end, Lucas took a chance on something by doing an animation style and creating his own animation studio to do what he wanted to do. And I just, I got to call out, because I think this is so important. None of this happens without Lucas, right? Like, what they're even building, all the most successful Disney Star Wars right now, when you think of what's happening animated wise, when you think of like what's happening with The Mandalorian, all of that stuff, it's all predicated on things that Lucas just took a chance on.
Mm-hmm.
And the Clone Wars was one of the biggest chances of all time. Because lots of people forget, like you mentioned, a lot of people hated it. When it started, a lot of people hated Ahsoka, and what happened? They came around, baby, and we're living in a world that we're just reaping the benefits of Lucas sticking to his guns, So, it leaves me hopeful, right? That as we move here into the future of Star Wars, if we can build on things like the success and the story of what we got in things like the Clone Wars, I think we're in good hands, man.
Here's hoping. Just sit back and just support some of the crazy stuff, because I want to see crazy stuff. I don't want to see just the lore building like we were saying. I want to see the nutty things coming out there too, and I want to see Maul season 2, and I want to see many seasons of Maul. I want every possible season of Maul that they could possibly order to happen.
100%.
Because we got room here for all of that. And you know where else we got room? We got lots of room online for people to find you and contact you and get further thoughts about how the Clone Wars shaped Star Wars and other things. So, Matt, where can they find you online?
Well, you can find me all over social media under the name Matt Rushing02. If I am on the platform, that's where you'll find me. You'll just want to search that name. And I'd love to talk to you. Of course, here on the network, you can find me on Owlpost, talking about every single chapter of the Harry Potter series, one chapter at a time. And then over on the TFM network, doing a bunch of shows. One's called the 602 Club. John's a frequent guest over there, talking about all of the franchises we love outside of Star Trek. Plus, a lot of great Star Trek talk with my good friend Chris Jones that you can check out as well. But, John, maybe, people want to talk about the Clone Wars or more Star Wars, or, blogging is back for John Mills. So where can they find you?
Well, blogging is making a guest appearance, that's for sure. Here's hoping it's a more extended run than it's been before. But yes, you can find me as Kessel Junkie out there. Just look around, you'll find me. And you can find me here on the network, co-hosting a show called House Lights with Tristan Riddell and Darren Moser, where we have a time talking about movies. And someday I'll get those wusses to watch horror films. But, you know, they are wusses. But other than that, Matt, I am going to go plan an entire horror series based in Star Wars because, gosh darn it, that's what I want. I want something scary, something fun. So let's go on back to the temple and storyboard it out because I think it's time to close these negotiations.
John, negotiations are closed.
Join the revolution. Join the Nerd Party.